Time now for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for staying with us. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the leaders of Kenya, Congo Brazzaville and Gabon are amongst dozens of African politicians caught up in revelations from the Pandora Papers. The leak of financial papers has exposed a network of secret offshore financial structures used by rich and powerful people from around the world. Also, Ethiopia's Prime Minister sworn in for a 5-year term amidst global criticism over the humanitarian emergencies triggered by ongoing conflict in the country's north. Abiy Ahmed slams foreign interference, saying that he'll start a process of national dialogue. And Cameroon runs military exercises as it ramps up security preparations ahead of the Africa Cup of Nations next January. The hotly anticipated continental tournament will come as the country struggles to tackle a violent Anglophone insurgency and fend off Boko Haram extremists in the north. But first, several African leaders have been implicated in the Pandora Papers scandal. More than 12 million documents exposing secret offshore tax havens in which hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets. They've been leaked to international journalists. Nearly 50 politicians and public officials from 18 African countries have featured in the confidential documents. They include the presidents of Kenya, Republic of Congo and Gabon, and Ivory Coast Prime Minister. Nicolas Chemin has more.
Nearly 12 million documents listing tax havens have been analysed by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the ICIJ. More than 300 politicians are concerned, including about 50 from the African continent. Among them is Ivorian Prime Minister Patrick Achi, who said he had done nothing illegal. He controlled a company in the Bahamas at least until 2006. Noël Conan is an Ivorian journalist who took part in the investigation.
The documents that were leaked belong to a law firm. We noticed that the Prime Minister did not want his name linked to this firm. He hid behind the name of another company, therefore making his activities more opaque.
Uhuru Kenyatta's family is accused of secretly owning a network of 11 offshore companies, one of which was valued as holding assets of $30 million. Surprisingly, Kenyatta issued a statement saying this investigation will enhance financial transparency, but he did not comment on the allegations about his family. The ICIJ also reported that for nearly 20 years, the president of Congo Brazzaville, Denis Sassou Nguesso, owned an offshore company in the British Virgin Islands. That's also where Gabon's president, Ali Bongo, had 2 offshore companies. In most of these countries, owning an offshore account is not illegal. But the ICIJ stressed that leaders who used tax havens were often the same ones who said they were actively fighting against corruption.
Well, as we heard there, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta says that he thinks that the Pandora Papers will enhance financial transparency. He hasn't directly responded to allegations that he and his family own almost a dozen companies worth tens of millions of dollars. He's not been implicated in anything illegal, but the revelations do still undermine his anti-graft position in the country. Caroline Kimio tells us more.
The recent revelations are a major blow to President Kenyatta, who during his 2 terms in office has portrayed himself as a major advocate for anti-corruption and financial transparency. In fact, in 2017, he rode into office on an anti-corruption campaign, and in a 2018 interview said that as a public servant, he was under a duty to disclose his assets to the public. At this point, it's not clear where the money came from, and there is no evidence that corruption was involved. What is clear from the papers and the investigation carried out by the ICIJ and Africa Uncensored is that the Kenyattas own 13 offshore companies in different tax havens, with assets totaling to nearly $30 million. The beneficiaries of those assets are President Kenyatta, Mama Ngina Kenyatta, his mother, his brother, and 2 sisters. Uhuru Kenyatta, who is currently in Ethiopia, released a statement through the State House press secretary saying that the papers provide enhanced financial transparency that is much needed in Kenya and the world. He will speak further on this when he's back in the country.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, has been sworn in for a second 5-year term. He faces major challenges as war in the northern region of Tigray spreads. It's triggered a humanitarian crisis that's seen Abiy accused of blocking aid to those facing famine. Maria Gerth-Nicolescu has more.
Abiy Ahmed's speech this Monday on one of Addis Ababa's most emblematic squares marks his second term as Ethiopia's prime minister. 5 heads of state, including leaders from Senegal, Kenya or South Sudan, attended the colorful ceremony. In the morning, Abiy Ahmed was sworn in by the newly elected parliament, where his party, the Prosperity Party, had won a wide majority during the first phase of voting in June. A second phase of voting in some places where polls had been postponed took place last Thursday, but results have not been announced yet and would not significantly alter the balance of power in Parliament. Opposition parties boycotted the election in Ethiopia's 2 largest regions. Several areas, including in the Amhara region, still haven't been able to vote because of the insecurity. The entire Tigray region, where a conflict has been unfolding for 11 months now, did also not participate in the election. Observers say Abiy's new term could be the start of de-escalation in the north of the country, where Tigrayan forces are still clashing with the national army as well as forces of the Amhara region. But last week, the government expelled 7 high-ranking UN officials for meddling into internal affairs. The UN had been increasingly vocal about the difficulty to channel humanitarian aid into Tigray, where residents are facing starvation, according to the UN. So far, attempts to mediation or ceasefire have failed. It remains to be seen how this new mandate will have an impact on the crisis.
Nigerian doctors say that they'll call off a 2-month pay strike this week and head back into work on Wednesday. The Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors says that some of the issues regarding salary and poor conditions still have not been settled with the government, but that some of the payments they've been calling for have been made. The walkout first began in early August in protest over delayed wages. Some still outstanding, and the union's still pushing for the payment of benefits due to the families of doctors who died of COVID-19. It said it will meet again in 6 weeks to assess progress. UN human rights investigators say that they have evidence of possible war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Libya. Many of the alleged abuses were committed against civilians and migrants. More than 5,000 migrants have recently been detained in an unprecedented large-scale crackdown. The Human Rights Council's report documents accounts of murder, torture, rape and enslavement. All parties involved in the decade of conflict that racked the country following the 2011 revolution have been accused of violating international humanitarian law. Foreign mercenaries have also been implicated. And days ahead of a French-Africa summit that Paris is hoping to reset ties with the continent, France's relationship with Algeria is more frayed than ever. Algeria's prime minister has spoken for the first time in response to a row that saw Algiers recall its ambassador from Paris and ban French military planes from its airspace. The move follows reports that French President Emmanuel Macron told descendants of Algeria's War of Independence that the country was ruled by a political military system and had totally rewritten its history.
We must respect the history of Algeria and its roots. Algeria is great and above anyone who makes these kinds of statements, which we consider unacceptable.
Well, 4 months before the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations, Cameroon's launched a series of military exercises to prepare for the possibility of a terrorist attack taking place during the continental football tournament. The country's faced a violent Anglophone crisis in the English-speaking regions and attacks from Nigerian Boko Haram insurgents in the north. Our team sent us this report.
At the ABIY Stadium in Yaoundé, Commissioner Guy and his team stormed the control room. On the screen, surveillance camera videos show a hostage simulation during a football match. The exercise is part of measures aimed at boosting security around this stadium, ahead of the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations to be hosted by Cameroon.
We are still waiting for the instructions to make contact.
The clock is ticking, but first, the commissioner has to try negotiating with the kidnappers. However, if negotiations fail, their device is set to switch to a plan B.
We have a total of 10 abductors and 5 hostages, including 4 injured, and they have the Minister of Sports with them. We will try to appease the kidnappers as much as possible.
At the same time, a special intervention unit is discreetly positioned at a corner of the stadium. After an hour of failed negotiations, the assault is launched. It takes a few seconds for the assailants to be neutralized. Traumatized hostages are then evacuated. It is a successful mission for the Special Forces, assisted in the mock operation by 2 elite units of Cameroon's police and the gendarmerie, the Special Operations Group and the National Gendarmerie Intervention Group.
The operation went very well, and I must remind you that this is only the visible part of our work. We have 4 snipers in position.
Injured victims are being rescued at another corner of the stadium. About 1,600 defense and security forces as well as civilians were deployed for the mission. Authorities believe that the drill is crucial, given that the country is currently battling an Islamist insurgency in the north and a pro-independence uprising in its English-speaking regions.
You know, our country is facing a number of crises, including areas of tension, and it's important that we prepare ourselves, because anything can happen, and the defense and security forces must be ready to intervene in case of an event like the one we simulated earlier.
Cameroon's defense and security forces have planned similar exercises in the coming weeks. They are poised to minimize any risks during AFCON. The football jamboree is expected to bring tens of thousands of spectators and officials to Cameroon in January 2022.
Well, that's it for Iron Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
France 24, c'est la richesse de la diversité culturelle mondiale, avec un réseau de correspondants à travers la planète.
En France 24 en español comunicamos a Latinoamérica con el mundo entero.
روح مهنية شعارها واحد: حرية التعبير. هذه هي بصمة France 24.